Alright, iPad versus. It's been asked many times, the 11-inch M2 iPad Pro versus the M1 iPad Air. Which is better? Well, let's talk about it. So to start, these are very similar tablets. Despite their different prices, they have very similar designs, sizes, and features, with just a few added bonuses on the Pro side that we're going to talk about. For context, here are the raw stats of both devices in question here. As you can tell, the iPad Pro has quite a few more features over the iPad Air. But I want to draw your attention to one thing in particular, the processors, where the majority of the differences actually lie. The 11-inch iPad Pro sports the M2 chip, which is Apple's new super speedy processor found in its MacBooks, while the iPad Air sports the M1 chip, which is still super speedy, but not as high performing as M2. So you see where this comparison's going here. But there's a bit more nuance to this discussion. So to further explain, let's talk about the pros and cons of these devices to help you make your decision on your own. As previously stated, the iPad Pro runs the new M2 chip, while the iPad Air uses the older M1, at a cost of $200 extra. So is it worth it? How much of a performance bump is there, really? Well, here are the benchmarks to visualize the performance differences. But benchmarks are just benchmarks. What about the real world? Well, I can say for the M1 chip and the iPad Air, it thankfully can run anything you really need for a tablet except the most demanding applications. Because the M1 chip, although it's not as good as the M2 processor, is still a laptop chip put into a tablet, meaning it will surely be good enough for most people. But for those select few who can push their tablets to their limits, the iPad Pro will definitely give you quite the overhead clearance with its better processor, because the M2 chip is faster by a steady margin. But even still, that extra performance boost might be more of a luxury than a necessity for most people. So that's something to factor in when getting the iPad Pro or the iPad Air, luxuries versus necessities. And with that, you'll also be getting a better screen with the more expensive tablet. Although they're very similar in size, the iPad Pro has a far better display over the iPad Air, because it has ProMotion, which means it runs at 120 Hz, so it looks faster and smoother, which is especially important for professionals because of their precise work, and also pretty satisfying for us typical consumers too. But again, for the typical consumer, this does seem more like a luxury rather than a necessity. We'll continue on with this theme. And another pro for the iPad Pro is the camera setup. The more expensive iPad really does have a better camera at the rear, with multiple different lenses, including a LiDAR scanner, which are just so cool and useful for those who need them. Again, probably a luxury here for most of us. Not many people even take pictures with their tablets over their phones. Plus, not everyone uses LiDAR scanners, so factor that in. And lastly, here's a list of a bunch of miscellaneous features that you might want to take into consideration as well, including better Wi-Fi connectivity with the iPad Pro, Apple Pencil Hover with the more expensive tablet, and a little bit more base storage, just to name a few. So overall, as I previously stated, the iPad Pro and iPad Air do share many similar characteristics, with their designs and tech underneath being fairly similar. Heck, even their weights are nearly identical. But the more expensive iPad Pro does have a few extra features built in. The real question is though, are any of those really necessary for you? Because depending on your line of work and budget, you'll have different needs. So make sure you focus on your needs with this purchase. So to help out, here is a more definitive answer. I'd say if you're a professional such as a video or photo editor or something along those lines, and you can afford it, you should get the iPad Pro. There are many professions that can surely take advantage of all the cool features of the more expensive iPad, so I'd suggest you get the one that best covers all of those needs. But if you're a typical consumer who will be using the tablet for a variety of things, such as work, leisure, and convenience, I'd suggest getting the M1 iPad Air. I'm not saying the iPad Pro is not an option for you. You can make the decision on your own with the pros and cons, but make sure you focus on your needs first, and then go from there. The M1 iPad Air can certainly do nearly everything the M2 iPad Pro can, just not the top tier performance work. So if you're not going to be doing anything like that, the iPad Air will certainly be fine for you. Besides that though, it's up to you and your personal preference. And that was my quick comparison of the 11-inch M2 iPad Pro versus the M1 iPad Air. Let me know if you want me to make a more student version of this video as well, with my own iPad, and I'll be happy to do that. Anyway, my name is Seeroos. It's spelled like Cyrus, pronounced like sea rooster, just take out the terror. Thank you very much for watching and have a wonderful day. Peace.